Hey guys, so today you and I are going to talk about documentation. So let's get into it. So the question in question was, hi Frederick, should one be taught how to document their software along with its importance as part of a computer science curriculum? Nope, I would say not. I think that this is one of those fluff things that only people who are ignorant of how regular humans work think is a good idea. And I actually have, I argue, very little, well, their emotional intelligence and insight into these topics is hilariously low. It's the sort of stuff where these are the sort of things where people like they make up something that sounds good in their head, but they fundamentally lack the understanding of what people do, like what is actually important. And I usually tell people that there is only ever one thing that you can truly bet on, and that is that given the chance, people will do what is comfortable, not anything else, like apart from it being strictly necessary. If it's not strictly necessary, it's going to be what's comfortable. And so the reason why I argue that documentation isn't being written in the way, and it doesn't matter if you teach people the value of it, because if they don't feel the value, and they won't, no matter how many courses they take, because fundamentally it comes down to that documentation is something you write for other people. And as you can probably imagine, there's quite a lot of people around the world who don't give two shits about other people. And you see that in every single job across the world. So these are the people that usually managers want to look out for, which are the people who actually given the opportunity without being forced to do something, they will make sure that their workstation is nice and clean after they're done with it. They will make sure that if something gets forgotten, that they will pick it up. They will make sure that it's overall they will do extra things that are not strictly necessary just because. These are the people who write documentation. These are the people who, as I said, these are the people who clean their room without anybody having to actually be coming over, stuff like that. They actually care about something that is not strictly necessary. They're not well, I'm not saying that they're not lazy. I'm saying that they see a value in providing something that will be nice for other people that is not strictly beneficial to them. And so for software developers, I can tell you right now, guys, in all the years I've worked, I have yet to be in a single software team where there was more than one person that had that trait, that actually wrote documentation and made sure that it was easy to, because even if you tell people let's write documentation, you're not guaranteed that it's going to be good documentation. And that's another part. If shitty documentation might as well just be documentation you don't write in the first place. I've seen plenty of product managers and people whose job it literally is to do this. Do you have any idea how hard it is to get a story card with a clear specification out of a product owner? The average story card, based on my completely biased personal experiences here, is a one-liner. Do this thing. They have to be taught how to explain what a developer should. It's the same thing with the developers. A one-liner, we should do this. And I ask every single time, in 6 months, will you remember what that card is about? And then they say yes. And then I go down into the backlog to like 2/3 of the backlog down, open a random card and ask, what's this card about? And they can't tell me. There's your proof. This is what I'm talking. Short-term personal benefit is what you bet on when it comes to documentation. It's the same thing with if well, this is a little bit biased as well, but if sports as part of a curriculum had an effect, how is it that most of the planet is obese? Like over 50% of the modern world is obese. Same deal. You can teach people to do something, but when it comes to this is not a question of that you don't know. This is a case that you don't care because you don't have to care. And so when you don't have to, as I said, usually people are on average lazy. So if you really want to solve the documentation problem, what I would say is that you need to show people how to write it, but you fundamentally need to have a stakeholder. This is what I usually do. It's the thing I do for my teams, for example. So as I said, like a classic one is, I will even go as far as to say that this is the only way you can make meaningful change happen, and that is top down. So when you're, for example, as a manager, or in my case, a principal engineer, if I wanted to make sure that all my teams and all the people I work with, like, they all write unit tests. Now, I know I can't force them to write good unit tests, but I can force them to write unit tests. But I have to also make sure that they feel as if this matters, and I have to make them feel that there is a real interest in that this is happening, because I can't just tell them, oh yes, do this thing, and then never talk about it again, because they're not going to care about it unless I ask them to. Maybe one or two people, like a few people, will care, but on average they won't, because they are not forced to care. So what do? Well, I say, okay guys, we'll all introduce a coverage check now into our pipelines. And every single month, I'm going to go and look at your numbers and just check that everything's going in the right direction. What I just did there is that I introduced accountability. The same thing that your manager does when he wants you to come into or she wants you to, like, show up for work, these sorts of things. Like, if I'm gonna pay, it's the same deal. Like, you're basically putting some type of pressure, some accountability into the mix, and by doing that, you can at least get people to do the thing. That's the first step. Then the second part is, okay, so now you need to do it well. And this is where I usually lose most of the companies and so forth and so forth. And I say to them, if you care about people writing good documentation, it doesn't even have to be good documentation. I would never suggest this for documentation, but it doesn't matter what it is. If you have a team or a person or something like that who is doing, quote unquote, the thing that you are, quote unquote, forcing them to do, but they're underachieving or they're not actually doing it well, or so forth and so forth, then you only have two options. And that is to either teach them how to do it well, and hope that they have the aptitude and that they care enough to really, really try. And trust me, guys, it's far from everybody who wants to do really, really well, even though it's supposed to be something that they should care about and so forth. And then the only other option you have is to fire them. It's a carrot stick type of situation. When people do not have to care, you have to give them some incentive to do so, either by rewarding them or punishing them. And sadly, neither of those things are going to happen for your documentation, and that is why this is not even software development, guys. This is true for every organization in the entire world. There is not a single company I can imagine where documentation is apart from highly specialized situations where people will care about this stuff, because it's the exact same reason why you have these accountability checks in place in every organization. Because if you let your workers do whatever the fuck they want, they won't even show up to work and just collect a paycheck. So what I want you to take away from this is that, no, I don't think that you need to waste time, because I would argue that this would be a waste of time. You can absolutely take a course in writing good documentation and things like that, guys. But adding this to the curriculum is, as I said, there's a ton of courses that in every education system that has very little value, where, correct me if I'm wrong, but I'm pretty sure that if you think back to your school days, assuming now that you're out of school and so forth, do you feel like every course you ever took was really, really important? Super, super important, really, really valuable, and you're absolutely taking those life lessons with you? I would argue that at least a few of us could see that there were a few things there that may have not made a lot of sense. And that's what, well, I argue at the very least there's quite a lot of politics as well in our basic education, especially in my part of the world, and probably in the US and other places as well, where people just think that this sounds like a cool, you should learn this stuff. It's not necessarily life long learning things, or things that will benefit you quite a lot in the future. So for it's just something that someone threw in there. And every single education has the same sort of deal, right? And that's why I tell people that when it comes to these sort of nice to have things that don't strictly matter to, as I said, like if you don't write software as a software developer, you don't show up to work as a construction worker or something like that, you get fired. And that is, sadly enough, the level of severity you have to introduce for some tasks. And there is no other way to basically get people to do something or even do it well or so forth. Like, that's another story, right? How do you get them to do it well? My suggestion is, if you want to improve your documentation in your company and so forth, put some expectations on people. Again, that's what I do. I do checkings. Like, I go to various product teams at times and I say, hey, where is your user guide so I can understand how your system works? And if they say, we don't have one, and then I start asking, why don't you? Well, I would like you to have some, if it's important. Like, I'm just giving you an example here. All of a sudden, I'm a stakeholder. I'm a customer, or I'm a person who cares about that stuff. And if your manager starts doing this, that's sort of the thing, right? If it really does matter, you have to make sure that your workers or like your coworkers and so forth know that it matters. And sadly enough, some of we're good enough. Some people will do it organically. They will just do it because they are really nice people and they care about this sort of stuff. Some people have to be told by the manager. I've lost count how many times I've asked for something and then they say no, and then when I go to their manager, then they say yes, that was no problem whatsoever. Because some people respond to carrot and some people respond to stick. And you can always bet on human laziness. Have a great day.